welcome everybody. It's great to see you guys, and welcome to Grace Church this weekend. Everybody online and over at Montrose, great to see you as well. Thanks for joining us. I'm excited to start a new series this weekend that we're calling Who, What, When. And this series, I'm going to walk you through a process that's going to help you align your heart and your mind and your actions and your schedule with the heart and the mind of God. And so we're going to work on this for a little bit, and I'm going to kind of walk you through how God would want us to live that way, and then how we would want to arrange ourselves as a church family. We started a few weeks ago before Easter. I was telling you that God is just doing some incredible things here at Grace. He's given us great opportunities. And what has happened and what we're kind of going through right now is that the opportunities are outpacing our ability to keep up with them. And I introduced this concept to you, and we talked about planting new churches. We talked about what's happening in our student ministry, our children's ministry, our young adult ministry collective, and our desire to start a ministry for those who have special needs. And I could go on and on and on. God's just doing great things. And I said to you, in order to meet those opportunities, then what we have to do is we have to raise up resources and relationships. And so we spent a few weeks and we talked about the resource side of that. And I asked you guys if you would come around all that financially, and most of us did. I know some of you were gone. I got 3 phone calls this week, and because of spring break, because apparently you love the beach more than Jesus, but that's a different conversation. But you were saying, where are the commitment cards? Can we still fill one out? So there are some in the back of the chairs. If you want to fill that out and drop it off, you can in the boxes or bring it to the office. If you know what I'm talking about, that's where they are. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it, right? So, but they're there if you want to do that. And I'll announce all kind of how that played out next weekend. But I can tell you I'm super encouraged about our responsiveness and what I think it's going to allow us to do. So we talked about that, and I told you before Easter, I said the easy part of this response is the financial part. Giving money to something, investing money intentionally, regularly, in an ongoing way is the easiest response that we have to problems and issues and opportunities around us. And I told you after Easter, we're going to start the hard part of the conversation, and that's the relational conversation. So me giving money is important and sacrificial. I'm not saying it's a no-brainer. Me rearranging my life to love people, to walk with people, and to help them know who Jesus is a much more difficult proposition. And I want to start having this conversation together. And I want you to kind of envision it this way. When we talk about money here at Grace, I just always describe it as the family table. The Bible says that the church is a spiritual family. Families talk about money. It's no big deal. And if we're going to do something financially, Heidi and I sit down at the table and we figure out how we're going to take a vacation or remodel the basement or get the kids through college and all that kind of stuff, right? So we have family conversations. Families also have relational conversations. So we would sit down as a family at the table and we would say we have these relationships in our lives, and some of these relationships need emphasized in different ways. There's people in our life that we need to care for. There's people in our life that we're inviting into our life. We've moved people into our home from time to time. Like that's going to happen. Like these people are going to stay with us for a while. There's people in our life that we need to connect to, and then there's relational decisions that we make, and they usually surround the schedule. So like in our family, years ago, Heidi and I made a very conscious decision that our life was going to center around the local church, not the local school. And so I'm all for our school. I'll cheer for them and everything like that. But we just said sports and activities are not going to displace our children being raised and tied into the local church, because we know that they'll leave school behind them, high school behind them, but they'll never leave Jesus behind them. So we made that decision. So that meant that there was a little less soccer and a lot more youth group. That there was a little less band camp in the summer and a lot more missions trip, that kind of stuff. And those are relational decisions that we made. So just like a family would organize itself financially, a family has to organize itself relationally. And then that winds up really reflecting the values and the intention and the intentionality of a family. So when we talk about surrounding opportunities with relationships, we're talking about the intentionality of those relationships. And how do I do that? What would I make that priority? And then how would I go about doing that? So that's what we're going to talk about here for the next few weeks. Now, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, then you are in the spiritual family and you're at the table, right? And so everything I'm going to say and show you about what Jesus says, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you. Don't make me show up at your house. Don't make me send Heidi over. Like you don't want this to happen, so I'm talking to you. If you're not a follower of Jesus yet, or if you're a follower of Jesus and you're like, this is my first week at Grace Church, what I want is I want to extend an invitation to come to the table. All right? So I want you to sit and be a part of this conversation. It's going to impact you differently, right? Because you're investigating all of that. But I want you to hear, I certainly want you to hear what Jesus has to say. And I think what it'll do is it'll help Jesus make more sense to you. It'll help Grace Church make sense to you. And if you're not a follower of Jesus yet and you have a friend that is, it'll help explain why your friend's weird and like what they're doing, what they care about, right? And so I want you to feel an invitation into that table, okay? So I want to talk about these relationships. Now, as a follower of Jesus Christ, my goal as a follower of Jesus Christ is to reflect the heart and the mind of Jesus. That's what it means to be a Christian. So the word Christian means like Christ, or the old Greek word would mean little Christ. And the idea is that I follow Jesus, I'm his disciple or his apprentice, and I'm trying to graft into my life everything that Jesus taught, believed, stood for, and lived out. And so I want my life to look like Jesus' life. Later on in the Bible, the Apostle Paul said it this way. He says, I want to make this appeal about following Jesus as if Christ himself were making it. So I want to act like, talk like, love like, and be motivated like Jesus Christ. So if I'm, as a Christ follower, trying to figure out how I'm going to order my life, how I'm going to prioritize everything from my finances to my schedule, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at Jesus. And I'm going to look and say, okay, if I believe that Jesus is a great God, he's not just a good guy, I'm going to look and say, what did Jesus do? What did he think? What did he prioritize? And what was the prime directive of his life? And when you start looking at Jesus' life, what you'll see is there's a Jesus that is wonderfully complex and wonderfully deep. And so Jesus is loving and he's compassionate and he's a truth teller and he cares about people's physical needs. He would feed hungry people. He would heal sick people. He cares about their spiritual needs. He's this wonderfully complex, wonderful person to understand and emulate. But as I look at his life and if I start to ask the question, what is his prime directive? Like he's all of these things and all that is true, but what's like the thing that drove him and the thing that made him step out of heaven and come to earth, put skin on, offer his life and take it up again? What was his prime directive? When you look at Jesus' life and teaching, his prime directive becomes super clear, and Jesus summed it up in Luke chapter 19 when he said this, for the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. So Jesus, if you looked at Jesus and said, tell me the reason that you're here, he would say, well, I came to seek and save the lost. Like I am very aware that humanity was created to be in a right relationship with a perfect God, in a close relationship with a perfect God. But humanity has broken away from that relationship with God because of sin. Sin is everything wrong that's ever happened. Everything wrong that's ever happened to you and everything wrong that you've ever done to another person or to God. So that's sin. And sin breaks our relationship with God, which means that humanity is living a life and living in a place that we were not created to live. We're living far from God instead of at one with God. Jesus says people like that, the Bible uses the word that they're lost. They're adrift. They're everything from a spiritual rebellion to I just don't know what you're talking about, that they're out here by themselves. And Jesus says, I came to seek and save those people. I came so that they could know that they're far from me. I came so they could know that they were created to be with me, and that everything that they're missing in their life is tied to the fact that they're not in the relationship with me they were created to be in a relationship with. So I came to tell them that. I came to show them that. I came to illustrate that. And when you read the Bible and you hear the language that God uses to describe that, God uses a life and death language. So he says the wages of sin is death. He would say when you ask the forgiveness of your sin, you move from death to life. You move from darkness to light. The Bible would say Jesus came to rescue those who are perishing. His brother Jude says that we're to snatch people out of the fires of judgment. The Bible says that God comes to give us a new life, to cause us to be reborn, to set a captive free, to ransom the person that's enslaved to sin. So all this super strong language is describing Jesus' heart. So when Jesus shows up on the planet to seek and save the lost, in his mind, that's a life and death conversation. That if you don't know me, and by the way, I'm the only way, the only truth, the only life, I'm the only path to heaven, I'm the only name by under which you must be saved. If you don't know me and receive my salvation, then you're going to lose your soul and your life eternally to hell. And you're going to live in a foreshadowing of that hell while you're on the planet. You're not going to have the hope and the peace and the forgiveness and the joy and the freedom and from anxiety and fear, all that kind of stuff that you want. It's all tied to that. But if you accept my salvation, that I died for, that I rose again, demonstrating that I have the power to give it, then I will free you, rescue you, ransom you, rebirth you, recreate you, bring you from death to life, from darkness to light. And so Jesus looks and says, that's my mission. That's the primary reason I came, and that is my prime directive. And when you're watching me care for people's needs or heal them or feed them or comfort them, etc., that is all within the context of me seeking to save those who are lost. And then what he does is right before he goes back to heaven, the last thing he says to his followers is he says, I want you guys to go on this mission. So we call this the Great Commission. This is Jesus' words. Therefore, go make disciples, all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, name of the Son, name of the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commandments I've given you. And be sure of this, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. So Jesus would say, I came to seek and save the lost. You were lost. I sought you. I saved you. If you're my follower. And now that you are my follower, you are mimicking me. You are reflecting me. You're my disciple. You're my apprentice. So I want my prime directive to be your prime directive. Now you go and you do for others what I did for you. Another place in the Bible, he says it this way. He says, you will be my witnesses. And you'll do that in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the othermost parts of the earth. So you're going to tell people the good news of who I am, that there's a Savior who loves them, cares for them, that you're trapped in sin, but you can be free, you can be ransomed, you can be rescued, you can be reborn. You're going to do all that. And you're going to do that to the people close to you, the people in your city, the people in your state, the people in your country, and ultimately the world. And that is how the good news of Jesus has moved over all of time. That's why before the internet, before television, before radio, before satellites, before the printing press, that's how the good news of Jesus moved from Jerusalem all over the world, because followers of Jesus were like, that was Jesus's prime directive, so I'm going to make it mine. And I'm going to act on that, and I'm going to personally look at other people and tell them the reason for the hope that's within me. And then as a church, we would look at like corporately, and we would do that. And that's why you plant churches and send missionaries and have sports programs and special needs, and that's why you do all that, because ultimately we're helping people know the truth that we have discovered for ourselves, right? And that is the prime directive of Jesus, and it is to be the prime directive of his followers' lives. And when it is, that is what causes your faith, your spirituality, your relationship with Jesus to come alive. If it isn't, that's where your faith becomes a religion, your spirituality becomes an obligation, and your interaction with Jesus becomes a guilt trip, right? Because we were meant to function on that prime directive. In fact, it's really, really interesting when you look at the Bible. When Jesus was calling his first disciples, it's really fascinating. He looked at them and he wasn't like, hey guys, like come follow me, you know? He wasn't like the turtle, the surfing the wave, right? Whatever that guy's name was, I forget now. But like he wasn't this hippie and this spiritual guru that kind of wandered around. When Jesus called his disciples, he said, in essence, I want you to interact with people intentionally, I want you to interact with them regularly, and I want you to interact with them in an ongoing way. And he created relationships for us to do that. So to follow him, this isn't something we drift into, migrate to, and kind of wonder where the flow of the sea takes us. This is something that we would do on purpose. That's how the gospel has spread all over the world before technology made it easy to do that. So when you look at his first followers, you see this. Like when Jesus, the first thing Jesus called his followers to was he called them, remember Peter, James, John, like those guys are fishermen. Jesus walks up to them while they're at work running their small business. He walks up to them and he says to them, come follow me and I will make you fishers of men. That's really, really important. Because when Jesus called his first followers, his first disciples, his first apprentices, he didn't look at them and say, come follow me and I will teach you how to study the Bible. He didn't look at them and say, come follow me and I'll teach you how to moralize your life. Peter, I've noticed you really struggle with the F-bomb, the Hebrew version of it. I don't know what it is. You know, kind of, I don't know. But like, I noticed that you really struggle with that, right? So we're going to get you not to do that anymore. He didn't call them the moral living. He didn't say, come follow me and I'll get you involved in a religion. He said, come follow me and I will make or teach or equip you to be fishers of men. I will teach you to seek and to save those who are lost. Very first thing he called his followers to. The very last thing then he said to those followers, this is the first thing he says. The last thing he says is what we just wrote. He says, now, he said, you go do that. You go be the fishers of men that I have called you, the Great Commission. So there's a bookend to it. The very first thing he does is says, come and I'll make you fishers of men. The very last thing he says is go and fish for men. That's what I want you to do. And what that means is this, that the Christian life, if you're a follower and you're familiar with that term, the Christian life or following Jesus is to be lived within these two bookends. And if you're a follower of Jesus and your life is not lived within the bookends of seeking to save those who are lost, then I promise you that your walk with Jesus is not the walk that you were called to, and it's not a walk that is fulfilling or meaningful to you. Because spiritual vitality is found in our lives by functioning on that prime directive. So if you're a follower of Jesus and you're looking and saying, yeah, you know, I remember when I used to be excited about my faith, but it's a memory, it's not a present reality. I struggle with the spiritual disciplines. Reading my Bible and praying for 14 minutes a day is just overwhelming, right? Well, why does it get like, well, are we going to church this weekend? Are we not going to church? I mean, there's sun. We may not see it again for months. Should we do it? I don't know. Should we went last week. It was Easter. I don't know. Right? What is all of that? What is all of that? When we're looking and saying, I believe that there was a life and death situation where my soul was in jeopardy and Jesus came to rescue me. I believe what Jesus said about himself. How does that turn into, I don't know, do you want to go? I'm not sure. How did that happen? Well, that happened because our walk with Jesus was not being played out. We weren't learning to be fishers of men, and then we weren't fishing for any. And we lose our spiritual vitality in the process. If you want your faith to come alive, if you want your walk with Jesus to be a real thing instead of a theological thing, you have to build your life around the prime directive to seek and to save the lost. If your prayer life is lame, I pray for my food, pray for safety. I've been praying for a woman, but that's not working, right? Like, if your prayer life is lame, why is your prayer life lame? Because you're not seeking to save the lost. If you have never contended for someone's soul, if you actually believe that if they don't know about the hope and the truth of Jesus, that they'll lose their soul eternally in hell, if you actually believe that at the core of all the ills in the world that are rooted in sin, every relational breakdown, every anxiety, every fear, every cultural problem, political problem, racial problem, monetary problem, if it's all rooted in sin, and you see someone who's trapped in that sin, and you believe that Jesus is actually a rescuer, a freer, a ransom payer, a rebirther, a new creator, and you see somebody you love who's desperately in that place, when you see them that way and you do that in the context of what you say you receive for yourself, you will pray like a mad woman, like a madman. Because you'll view what's going on in their life with the same urgency that Jesus viewed it, the same urgency that he deemed was worthy of his life. So why does your prayer life stink? Because of what you're praying for. And because of how you've organized your relationship. Why is the Bible boring? I gotta read my Bible. I'm not a reader. Just not a reader. Well, listen to it. I'm not a listener. I'm a listener. Well, watch it. I don't really watch anything. I'm out of options, right? Why is it a chore? Well, it's a chore because you're hungry. When God talks about wanting to know the Bible, he uses a real fascinating context. He talks about needing God's word in the terms of starvation and dehydration. And so he says, you hunger and thirst. Well, what would make you hunger and thirst? I don't know. Jeff said I got to read the Bible. That's not going to make you hunger and thirst. What would make you hunger and thirst? What would make you hunger and thirst is if you love someone and they're trapped and they're broken and they're lost, and you know they have questions that are legit, and you know that they've been raised in a culture that is the opposite of what God teaches, and you know they have doubts about God, but you love them and you're in a life and death struggle for them. When that is your position, you will go consume God's word looking for answers for them. See, everything comes alive when you're seeking to save those who are lost. You overcome your fears and anxieties. Well, I'm paralyzed by my fear. I'm paralyzed by my anxiety. Well, step out on faith. Do the thing that scares you. And you'll actually start to have victory. What would motivate you to do that? Well, love for someone who you believe, because you accepted Christ, you believe their soul will be lost. The church will come alive, and understanding the power. The church is something you attend until you get a heart for the lost, and then the church isn't a thing you attend. The church is a mission that you're on. Your joy will start to happen in real time. Your love for your neighbor will change. The vibrancy, you want a deep friendship, a deep marriage? Start contending for people's souls. All of that will deepen in a powerful way around you. True biblical community. I don't know, you want to go to small group? I don't know. We went to church. That's one. We only do 2 things a month. Small group or church? What should we do? Why is all that such a chore? Or why is it all such a question? It's because you're not contending for the lost. When you're contending for the lost and you're the only person at work and the only person in the dorm and the only person at school, and you're trying to find loving, gentle ways to tell about the hope and the salvation of Jesus Christ, suddenly when you have depleted yourself, your small group becomes salvation for you. I need to be surrounded. I need to pray for. I need biblical community. Why is it a chore? It's because you don't need it for anything. All of it comes alive when we're seeking to save the lost. Financial generosity. Nobody, if it's a life and death situation, nobody's going to beg you for money. You're going to offer it yourself. Everything changes and everything flows and everything is tied to our passion to seek and to save the lost. And it's Jesus' prime directive, and it's the prime directive he gives to his disciples. And if you're his disciple, then it's the thing that we organize our life around. And it's the truth that we build our purpose and our passions around because it was brought to us, okay? Now, this is what I know. I know that I can preach this sermon and I could cut it off right here. We could all get out of here 11 minutes early, right? And we could beat the Catholics to Rockneys and it'd be great, right? So I know, like I can make you feel guilty and I can make you feel like we should be doing that, like, you know, and all those kind of things. So here's the deal. My job as your pastor is not just to be smart and charming and witty and funny and sexy and like those are just things that you get to enjoy that God has given you as a gift, right? That's not my job. My job as your pastor is to equip you to do the work of the ministry. So this is the way that my life is supposed to work. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ just like you are. So I do everything, and I want to do everything that you want to do. I want to follow Jesus the way you want to follow Jesus. And then I'm a pastor. I've been appointed that by the elders of our church. So what I do is this. Not only do I follow Jesus, but I want to help you follow Jesus, and I want to teach you to follow Jesus. The way that I teach you to follow Jesus is I get in the trenches and follow Jesus with you. So my responsibility is not to yell at you and to convict you of sin. It's the Spirit of God's responsibility to convict you of sin. My responsibility is to help you be victorious. And what I know very clearly through lots of experiences is when I say you need to share your faith or spread the gospel or teach people about Jesus or do evangelism or pray for your 3 or however you would describe it, I know that when I say that, immediately fears and objections come to your mind. I know that. So immediately a bunch of us are going to be like, Jeff, I don't feel equipped to do that. I mean, if I was Dr. Bogue like you, then maybe I would know those answers, but I don't know those answers. And I don't read and I don't listen and I don't watch, so I don't know the Bible. And so like I'm not sure what to do, and I'm fearful of getting in a situation that I don't know what to do. Like, okay, I got you. That's legit fear. Another objection that comes to our mind is, I don't want to be that guy. Like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be like that pushy car salesman guy. I don't want to be that obnoxious guy. I'm not going to stand on a street corner and like scream at people as they're trying to get into Chipotle. Like, I'm not doing that. I don't want to be the guy on social media that posts all the weird stuff and says that the rapture is going to happen because there's an eclipse on Monday. Like, I don't want to be that guy. By the way, I don't want you to be that guy. And if you are that guy and you go do those things, do not tell anybody where you go to church. I don't want to be affiliated. Like, give me your Grace Church shirts back. You're you're banned from them. So I'm not talking about any of that, but I know that feeling. Like I've been trapped by people sharing Jesus with me, which is honestly, it's nothing but fun for me because I know all the objections, and so I like to make them cry. So but I don't want to be that guy, right? So that's the thing. Here's the other thing, and I think this is actually one of the biggest things that we struggle with in our culture today. We don't feel equipped, and then we don't want to be that guy. Here, I think this is what we struggle with a lot. A lot of us have very legitimate feelings and very legitimate thoughts and no plan. Very legitimate feelings, very legitimate thoughts, and no plan. Now, let me tell you, I am that guy. I actually had a friend confront me about this a few years ago, a very close friend. And he sat down with me. He said, Jeff, I got to confront you about something. I was like, how did he find out? And then it was something else. I was like, ooh. But I was like, so he's like, I got to talk to you about something. I was like, okay. He said, I trust you and I love you, which is normally the setup for I'm going to say something you don't want to hear. He said, I am with you and I will watch you pray and I will watch you weep over people that you love, which is true. I legitimately love you guys. And he's like, I watch you do that. And he's like, I believe that you're being honest. He said, I also will hear you talk about people and you'll run scenarios and you'll diagnose like what's going on in their life. And he said, you always do that in like a right and godly way. He said, so I trust your integrity is what he said. He said, I trust your sincerity. I trust your integrity. And I'm like, okay. He said, here's what I got to confront you about. You are sincere and you are real and you will sincerely feel something and you will really believe it and then you won't tell the person. You never say anything. And he said, you've done that to me. I'll hear you pray for me. And I trust that you're not faking it, but then you'll give a thumbs up to a text. And I trust that you love this person, and I trust that you're like a man of integrity, but you'll never go express that to that person. And I looked at my friend, and I was like, man, you're right. I'm like that. It's my personality. I don't know what happened to me in my childhood, but that's my personality. And I see that in our culture a lot. We'll feel very deeply and sincerely. It's not a fake feeling. And we're not lying. We're not like, I fake it at church. Okay, some of you do, but like most of us don't, right? We're not lying. But there's no plan. We don't act. We feel, but we don't act. And then because we don't act, we'll take our feelings and we'll add them to our objections, and then we'll say, that's why I don't act. I love them and they need to know Jesus, but I'm not equipped. I love that it's my best friend and he needs to know Christ. And I don't want to be that guy. See? And we'll feel, and we truly believe, we're not faking it, but we don't have a plan. Right? Now here's the deal. Jesus had a plan. Literally, the stuff Jesus did was prophesied hundreds of years before he did it. He was working a plan. The Apostle Paul, when he is helping to, explain what the church is, gives us plans. You evangelize, and then you train up, and then you entrust truth to reliable people, then you send them out. And the Apostle Paul says, do the work of an evangelist or the work of sharing. What is that? Well, that's not oh, bro, I don't know, That's not what that is. It's a plan. And it's a way that I would look at life, and it's a way that I would organize my life so that seeking to save those who are lost is a priority in my life that's actually just played out. It's not just a conviction of my life that I feel bad or guilty or inadequate about. Because when you say, well, I'm not equipped, I'm like, well, how long have you given that answer? When you say, I don't want to be that guy, I'm like, well, then what guy do you want to be? I mean, those aren't real reasons. Those are just the ones that come to mind. And then if you said to me, I love you, and I have found something that radically changed my life, that rescued me, freed me, rebirthed me, gave me a new life, and it's the focal point of my life, I would look at you and say, so you love me, but you don't tell me anything about that? So what I want to do over the next month or so is I want to show you and teach you, because it's my job to equip you. I want to show you and teach you how to live what I have titled or called a who, what, when life. And I want to show you how to live a who, what, when life. I want to show you how to have a who, what, when like lens on life. And I want to show you how to organize your life so that you can actuate who, what, when living. So who, what, when. What are we talking about? So you start with who. So here's the question I'd ask myself. Who am I seeking to make Jesus make sense to? So the reason that God has people in your life, the reason that you're in their life, is so that you can be, Jesus uses this metaphor, salt and light, so that you can be the one who helps Jesus make sense to the people that are around you. And Peter talks about this. He says, somebody asks you about your hope as a believer, always be ready to explain it. So the people in my life are in my life because God put them in my life. It's not just where I work. It's not just my dorm. It's not just my family. It's not just my neighborhood. It's not just my golf league. The people in my life are in my life because God put them in my life, because he is seeking to save them. And we become his instruments as if Christ himself were making his appeal through us. So I just start looking, and I start looking at the world differently, not with an agenda, not selfishly, not on some kind of a weird thing, but I'm just looking at the world differently, and I'm looking and saying, first of all, I'm just going to start with like, oh, there's all kinds of people in my life. And they're in my life because Jesus wants me to help his heart and his mind make sense to them. That's the who. And then I'm going to ask the question, what? What does it take for me to reach those people? What do I need to do? And this was the strategy or the thought process of the Apostle Paul. When he said, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and to share in its blessings. So what Paul does is he would walk into his work, or he'd walk into town, or he'd walk into jail. And wherever he was, he would look at the people and say, whoa, who are the people that God just brought into my life? Now, what do I need to do to help Jesus make sense to them? What is our common ground? Common ground might be basketball. Common ground might be school. It doesn't matter. Family, it doesn't matter. What do we have in common? And then what he says is, when I identify that common ground, I do that so that I can save some. Because on that common ground is where relationships are built. So I do that so I can save some. I do everything to spread the good news. Why? Because I think it's a life and death issue. I mean, if I believe that I was going to go to hell without Jesus' salvation, and I believe that he is the key to all things in my life, and I love you, like, wouldn't I try to convey that somehow? So there's a who's in my life, who is God brought into my life, or who do I need to bring into my life? There's a what do I need to do to reach them? And then there's a when. When is that effort occurring in my schedule? When is that effort occurring in my schedule? This is what Paul says is fascinating. He says, be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise, making the most of every opportunity. Here's the situation. We live in a culture, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. We live in a culture where we have two things that we do with our lives. One is we do some form of work. some form of work. And so whether it's school, whether it's a vocation, a job, whether it's making a home, whatever it is, we do some form of work. And that form of work takes about a third of our day, 8 hours-ish. The other 2/3 of our day is some form of entertainment. We live in a wonderfully blessed place that after I earn a living, I don't have to go home and create food for myself. So I don't work in the coal mine and then get off and come home and think, well, I got to hunt rabbits so we can eat tonight. We come home to a pantry full of food and a spigot full of clean water and a house or an apartment full of some kind of air conditioning. So we have basically two things in our life. We have what we would call our occupation or our school or homemaking. And then we have, what am I going to do with the rest of my day? Am I going to mow the grass? Because mowing the grass isn't a life or death issue. It makes life better, but it's not a life and death issue. Am I going to go to the gym? Am I going to watch television? And this is what happens. Anybody who's ever gone down the rabbit hole of reels on Instagram, or anybody who's ever gone down the rabbit hole of TikTok, or anybody who's ever got lost in binging the next episode knows what I mean. I ate, and now I'm going to entertain myself, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And what Paul would say is he's not prohibiting entertainment or hobbies. Don't hear me wrong. He's not prohibiting it. He's saying, when my whole of my discretionary time is lost, I don't know, I got into it. I don't know, I was in level 47. I don't know. When all of my discretionary time is lost, he would say, you're living like a fool. That's dumb. And it's a dumb way to live. And what he says is, don't live like fools. Live like those who are wise. He doesn't say don't play video games. He doesn't say don't watch Netflix. He doesn't say don't mow the grass. He doesn't say any of that. He's saying, what's dominating your life? Because it's not the prime directive of Jesus. Not if you're just lost in it. So what he would say is, you need to have a win. Now, here's how this goes. Who? Well, my friend. What? Well, they love to play video games. Maybe I could find the common ground of video games and build a spiritual relationship. When? Tuesdays. Who? Well, my buddy since high school. What? Well, he likes to play golf too. Doesn't the church have a golf league or something? Okay. When? Well, on Thursdays, I think. I don't really know. Right? See? And it's just who, what, when. Who, what, when. And it takes our life from drifting away, and it takes us from taking the good news of Jesus and just consuming it for ourselves. It takes the primary directive of Jesus, which is to seek and to save the lost, which is the primary directive of his followers, go and make disciples and be my witnesses. And it just turns it into a purposeful way of living. Who's God have in my life? What do I need to do to find common ground with them? And when is that actually on my schedule? Now, you guys have on your chairs, I want to show you this real quick. We'll talk about this real quick. You have on your chairs this. You're either sitting on it or it's under your chair. If you're sitting on it, you get it out from under you. Don't let somebody, this is church. Don't do that. So you get this out from under you. And what I want to do, but we're not going to do this today. I just want you to start to have it to think about it. But we're going to walk you through a process where you're just going to say who, what, when. Who, what, when. Who has God brought into my life? What am I doing to find common ground with him? And how am I actually changing my life to make that happen? Who, what, when. Not I don't know, everybody, man. No, there's real people in your life. What? I don't know, however the Spirit leads. Well, God is also a God of organization, right? So what? And then when? I don't know, man. Maybe someday. No, right? When's it actually on your schedule? Because if I don't see the people around me, then I don't understand why God placed me in the place he did in my life. The purpose of your job is not to make a living. The purpose of your job is to be a light. The purpose of school is not to get an education. I've been telling my mom that, man, right? The purpose of your school, right? The purpose of your school is to be with the people you go to school with. And the purpose of my free time as a Christ follower is not for me to do whatever I want. My time, my body, my life, and my resources do not belong to me. The idea would be this: because I don't have to go hunt a rabbit and grow a piece of corn so I can eat, God has given me extra free time so that I can share his love more. Because my needs are so abundantly provided for. All of us are talking about losing weight, not gaining it. Who, what, when, who, what, when. And when you start to look at that, and you turn that into a plan, and you turn that into a prayer, and you turn that into a reason to hunger and thirst for God's word, your spiritual life comes alive, right? Now, let me show you how this works, because this is not multi-level marketing. This is not Cutco. This is not used cars. So don't think of this wrong. This is people, and it's your love for people. So who, what, when. In the 1980s, my dad bumped into this young guy that just got out of the Air Force. And God brought him into my dad's sphere of influence. And my dad met this guy. His name was Brian. And my dad's always praying for people, and somehow he started praying for Brian, and God really put Brian on his heart. So my dad took Brian kind of under his wing. And my dad started to look for a common ground to connect with Brian on. Brian liked Led Zeppelin and pot. So my dad was like, maybe we can find another one. So the common ground was cars. So my dad, worked on cars, was very mechanical. Brian's very mechanical, and so they would start doing that. My dad would ask Brian to come help him with something. He was just inviting him in. He found the what of common ground, and then he found that Brian had a spiritual interest. And so he turned that common ground of, whatever into the common ground of what if we study the Bible together and I teach you about Jesus. And then he turned that into a when. When are we going to do that? How about Tuesdays? So my dad found a who, he found a what, and he found a when. God brought Brian into my dad's life, found a common ground of fixing stuff, helping people. And then he put it on my dad altered his life to invest in Brian, right? Who, what, when. Brian, his last name is Dinnerline. He's my brother-in-law. He came to know Christ, met my sister 40 plus years later. Brian and my sister put me through college. Brian broke all the cycles of his family. His mom knew Christ, his sisters know Christ. All of his children know Christ. Brian's life was transformed. Brian's life was altered. Our family was transformed. My nieces and nephews know Jesus because Dad had a who, a what, and a when. Heidi's dad, he came to know Christ when he was in college. His who was a group of people. So he went to engineering school, found Jesus, and started to wonder if Jesus was asking him to be a missionary to Brazil. So he investigated that. God put Brazil on his heart. He started to pray about Brazil. So Dad went to Brazil. And he went to Brazil to build a building as an engineering student. And so he went to Brazil. He met a Brazilian girl. He married her, Heidi's mom. And he said, I got to go back to Brazil because that's what God's calling me to. So what are you going to do there? I feel like God's calling me to plant churches. I read the book. What the Bible seems to say is churches should start churches. So I'll go down there and start churches. So he learned the language, learned Portuguese, went to seminary, learned the Bible. And he and Mom and Heidi and her brother grew up in Brazil, and he started churches. About 6 years ago, I had the privilege of preaching in the church my father-in-law started. It impacts hundreds and thousands of people. And they asked me to come down there so that I could teach them how to train up leaders so that they could send missionaries, because they were started by a missionary. And so doesn't the Bible say we should send them too? So I got to stand and build off of Dad's work. He had a who, he had a what, and he had a when. He was like, we're moving and we're staying there. There was these people named Milt and Nancy Petrie. They had a heart for teenagers. They had really rough childhoods, both of them. And they really had a heart for teenagers. They just felt like teenagers feel alone and isolated and have questions. And so they have a heart for it. Their little church came to them and said, there's nobody to teach the high school Sunday school class. So Milt said, I'll teach it. So he went and taught the Sunday school class. Milt went into the Hall of Fame as the worst Sunday school teacher in the history of Sunday school teachers. He was an awful Sunday school teacher. But he would show up every Sunday to teach Sunday school class. More importantly than teaching Sunday school class, Milt and Nancy had an empty nest. Their kids are grown up. And when their kids were in high school, they had built their basement out with the pool table and the ping pong table. They had a big sheepdog. They were like a hangout place. Well, now their kids aren't there hanging out anymore. So Milt and Nancy said, we'll teach Sunday school class because that's kind of what the church wants us to do. And we can meet teenagers in a non-creepy way. And then we'll open our home because it's actually already set up for teenagers to be in it. So every Friday night, they would open their home, and all those kids that went to that Sunday school class would get their friends and go over to Milt and Nancy's house. And they would play Atari and ping pong and pool, and then Nancy and Milt would always buy pizza. And the teenagers would stay way too late, and they would never clean their mess up. And their home became a place of safety. And Milt was a horrible Sunday school teacher. He was an incredible lover of Jesus Christ. And so he was not good in front of people, but he was amazing with people. And he would just share his love for Jesus. He would share his love for you. His wife would be right there in the room. And that was my youth group growing up. I think there's 4 or 5 of us that are pastors out of there. We probably speak to thousands of people because Milt and Nancy had a who, a what, and a when. They weren't selling knives. They were just loving people, and they altered their life to do it. It's a guy named Steve Huber. He was a college student, and he lived out in Philadelphia. And there was a guy that came in for the summer out in Philadelphia, and Steve could see that this guy didn't know anybody, kind of an insecure guy, had a lot of questions about the Bible. So Steve just kind of picked up on that because in Steve's mind, the whole reason he knew you was so that he could help you know Jesus. That's just the way he thought, and that's how he still thinks. And so Steve just reached out to this guy, took this guy under his wing, and he just started inviting him to be wherever Steve was. So Steve had a Bible study, and he was to this guy, and he's like, you want to come to the Bible study? And the guy's like, okay. And then Steve is a party waiting to happen. He's just that guy. And so there was always a party. There was always some social thing, always some trip to the beach or something. And every time Steve was going to do that, he's like, you want to go with me? So he had a who, he had a what, and then the when was wherever I am, you are with me also, right? And so he just befriended and ran around with this guy. And as this guy got into this circle, it was the first time that the guy had seen a person with sincere faith. Like Steve actually loved Jesus and actually loved people, and the guy had never seen it before. And then because he saw that in Steve, as he went to these Bible studies, he started to see the Bible differently because he saw the Bible through Steve instead of through a religious construct. And he started to see that Steve's a lot like Jesus, and suddenly Jesus started to make sense to him. And he built friendships, which got his guards down, which opened his heart up. See? And Steve Huber's the reason I accepted Jesus. Jesus never made sense to me until Steve Huber had a who, a what, and a when. See how it works? And this is what God calls us to. This is what Jesus did. And if you are his follower, I'm not talking about all the objections because I think they're obnoxious too. I'm talking about people loving people purposely and allowing. We will disrupt our lives for ourselves. Time to go to the lake. Now that the kids are home, I want to do this. Now that I have freedom, I want to do this. We'll disrupt our lives for ourselves. And what Jesus did was he disrupted his life for us. I think things are going pretty good in heaven. But he looked at us and he loved us and he disrupted his life for us. And what he's saying to us is, guys, that's what you do. That's what you do. You disrupt your life. And if your life is not disrupted by your faith, I don't really know what your faith is. And the primary directive that he operated on was what I'm just calling who, what, and when. Right? And I love you, so I want to walk you through it, show you how, help you with your fears and your objections. And I want you to actually come out with a plan, right? Now, this weekend I'm going to give you homework, and it's on the back side of this card. And this is all I want you to get your head around this weekend. It's just where we'll start, okay? So on the back of that card is this. This is not a bingo board. We don't do that at Grace Church. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. This is also not something you're ever going to hand in. This is 100% private and 100% for you, okay? What this is, I just want you to start to see the people around you differently. So I want you to understand that God has placed you in the middle of a set of relationships, and these are some of them, these are not all of them. And in the middle of this set of relationships, God has placed you so that you can think of these people as the who's in your life. So when you think about me and you think about people that I work with, what happens is sometimes you're like, I don't know, that's just the guy I work with. And Jesus is like, no, that's the guy I love that I put you there to help me make sense to. And a lot of times, as an example, the people we work with, we never think, well, oh, that might be a who. The people that are in my extended family. It's my crazy cousin. Well, no, it's not just your family. The reason that God has you in that family is so that you can impact that family. And I never thought of my family that way. My dorm. Yeah, my fraternity brothers are crazy. You know, I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. I mean, it's all cool. Why are you in it? Why are you in it? And what would God have you do? So all this is we're going to start doing this here in a second. I want you to look around at the relationships around you and start to see that these are examples of who God has put in your life. And all I want, you don't have to call them, you don't have to do anything to them if you don't want to, but I just want you to start to see that you're surrounded by people who need the same hope and life change that you found. And that's why God put you in their life, okay? All right, so this is what I want us to do. Grab your card if you got it. The band's gonna come out here and they're gonna go into sing a couple songs here, but they're gonna give us a minute. And I'm gonna pray, and after I pray, I just want you to start to think and pray. I don't care if you fill it in or not. It's like I said, it's for you. I just want you to start to think and pray about who the who's are in your life, okay? All right, Jesus, would you join us in this moment, so to say? Would you personally interact with us, Lord? And Lord, as you challenge us and as you encourage us and as you push us forward, God, would you also reassure us and encourage us, even comfort us, so that as we start this process, God, it's not out of guilt, it's not out of shame, it's not from a place of defeat, but it's simply looking and saying, we want to be like you and we want to follow you. So Jesus, in these still moments before we move into the hecticness of the rest of our day, would you start to help us see the people around us the way that you see them, and start to develop in us kind of a who, what, when lens, so that we see their souls and we see their pain and we see their opportunity, God. And then we see ourselves as someone that you've placed there to be a part of addressing that. So God, stir in us in these personal ways even now. And I just encourage you to pray and to think and maybe start to write and start to visualize, so to say, the relationships that God has you in already.